Hello and welcome back. I'm Nicole, a cottage witch, and today I'm doing a tag called Goth Lit November, which was started by Rachel from Second Thoughts About the Mission and Bailey from the Bailey Grind. I first saw this video on the Mad Witches YouTube channel though. And I'll start with one caveat and say they've divided Gothic literature up into several categories: classics, Victorian, Southern Gothic, and contemporary. And I'll link the original list below because I went on a slight detour and ended up not quite in the same place as the original originators of the tag. Also, if I'm a bit sniffly and sound funny today, it's because I got my COVID booster yesterday and I always feel a bit crap the next day, so hot chocolate is here to help. And I may have to stop and start. We'll see how this goes. Okay, so I'll list my choices down below and go through those, but if you want to see the original list, I'll link that below as well. So you can, do it properly if you're so inclined. Okay, the classics. I'm not a big fan of the classics because they include books like The Castle of Otranto by Walpole and The Mysteries of Udolpho by Radcliffe. And I've read one of these. I think I tried reading Radcliffe and didn't finish it. Didn't like either of them. So moving swiftly along to the period I like the most, which is Victorian Gothic. Victorian-ish, anyway. Very dramatic, romantic literature sort of period. One of the books that I don't have is Dracula by Bram Stoker. And the reason I don't have it is because the story was interesting, but the sole female character drove me nuts. She was very, I'm so delicate I may faint. Please help do everything for me because I'm incapable of the most basic life tasks. So that drove me a bit around the bend. So I did not keep that book. One book that I may try reading again, I've gotten the audiobook out from the library, is Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. I tried reading it years ago and didn't finish it, but I can't for the life of me remember why I didn't finish it. Okay, now getting into the books that I have, because I love them. One is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which apparently she wrote when she was 18. So, if you ever need to feel unaccomplished, this is the book for that, but I love this book. It's a beautiful story about people's perceptions and misperceptions and the assumptions we make and how those hurt people. And maybe I should reread it again sometime. This cover is also, I can't remember what painting this is, but it's your classic one. Does it have it in here? No, not that I can see. But anyway, highly recommend this one because the monster is really not a monster, at least originally, and is very misunderstood. And yeah, it's really more, I think, about the consequences of Victor Frankenstein making somebody who looks like a monster and what follows on from that. So I love that one. Another one from roughly this time period is The Bride of Lammermoor by Walter Scott. I read this because there was an opera based on it, and I mean, they do come up with good paintings for some of these covers. This is the description on the back. It's a really interesting the castle as character sort of book, which is your typical Gothic horror, Gothic romance trope, I suppose. Ravenswood, and I just found it very entertaining, and the opera is fantastic. I love the opera. Can't remember who wrote it now, go figure. And this is one of the more accessible Walter Scott books I've ever read, because some of them have a lot of Scots in them, which I am less familiar with. So if you never tried Walter Scott and want to, and like Gothic literature, this is the one I'd say to start with. Now, some of my favorite authors of all time are the Brontes. So I've read this twice, I think, and I might read it again. This is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And basically I've read everything the Brontes have written except for their juvenilia, because I was slightly obsessed in university. And this is not what I would call a love story. It's a revenge story. There's a moment of love story in the beginning, but it doesn't last. And it's very, instead of a castle as the character, it's got the moors as a character, basically, and they create the setting, and that setting is integral to the story, and it's gorgeous, and I love it. It's very dramatic. It's I think falls into the category of purple prose, may have been one of the originals in that category. So if you don't like overly dramatic writing, this might not be for you, but I love it and will love it forever. Charlotte Bronte is the other. I've read Anne Bronte as well, but I didn't find her books to be as atmospheric. This one is your original Madwoman in the Attic. And I've read it, I think, about 3 times now, fairly recently. And I love it. One of her challenges was to write, well, a female character who wasn't stereotypically beautiful, which her sisters didn't think she could successfully do, and make her interesting. Because at the time that was pretty unheard of in literature, to have an ordinary looking woman be the main focus. And to make her a woman who insists on following her own path and her own sense of right and wrong in a society where women had very few options, especially poor women had so few options. And so she worked as a governess, I think they called her, teacher to, rich people's kids. And which I think, if I recall correctly, Charlotte Bronte did in real life. And she also taught in schools and was not impressed by the conditions, how kids and women were treated when they didn't have any money, and when charity was barely enough to keep them alive, and sometimes not even then. I've read I think about 3 biographies of Brontes, or Charlotte Bronte in particular, and I'll put them up on the screen. They're all fantastic. Highly recommend if you have any interest in any of the Brontes. Love that. Okay. One other short story that I don't have, but I have read, that fits into this category is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gillman, which is the one about a woman who is mentally ill and is confined to a bed to stare at yellow wallpaper because allegedly that sort of rest will help improve her health, but of course it doesn't. A couple of the books I think I'm going to read next month that fit into this category are Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan, the Fanu. I hadn't heard of this book until very recently, and it's some sort of lesbian vampire novel, pre-Dracula. So I thought, I'll give it a go. It's very little, with a very good cover, and it cost about $5 on Amazon. So it was very easy to get, and I thought, since I've read Dracula, I'll read the book that came before it. The other book I'm going to read is not this whole book, because this is the major works of Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Oy. However, Christabel is in here somewhere, and I think I'll read that. I haven't read a lot of Coleridge. I think I read a bit in university, but not much. Yeah, Christabel. So I'll read that one. I've read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which I think also may qualify as Gothic literature. I can't recall though. And you know, he's one of your classic romantic poets, along with Shelley and Byron. So I'm not going to read this whole thing because that's a bit much, and it would take forever. Also, like half of it is commentary, I think, or letters. Apparently letters and marginalia, and a moral and political lecture, none of which I have any interest in. Mostly I got it because it has Christabel in it. Alright, so that is the biggest collection of books that I've got here, which is the Victorian Gothic category. Next up is Southern Gothic, which I know less about because I'm Canadian, so we're very much not Southern. And I hadn't even read Shirley Jackson until quite recently. So I read The Haunting of Hill House and liked it but didn't love it. This one I loved though. This is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And, oops, it doesn't have what it's about. Oh, there it is. Synopsis, that's the word I'm looking for. It is very much the house is a character, and a creepy character. And very atmospheric, as I recall. And the characters are, again, sort of, assumptions are made about them, but the assumptions are not always accurate and cause a lot of harm. So it's about the misconceptions we have of each other, and isolation, chosen or enforced. And yeah, it's a bit odd. It's not, but I like odd. Odd is fine. Keeps things interesting. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about that one, I think. I enjoyed that. Another one is, okay, Edgar Allan Poe falls into this category, apparently. I have read poems of his. Do I have any at hand? I have this one. So these ones really are sort of Gothic. This is The Raven and Other Poems. And I've read this. And I've read some of his short stories. So if you don't like poetry, he does have short stories that also fall into the Gothic sort of tradition. Very moody, gloomy, atmospheric, that sort of thing. Haunting and weird, and eerie, as it's described on the back, as well as love, grief, and beauty. I mean, that sort of sums up Gothic literature. So yeah, that is pretty easy to read. The Raven is pretty classic. Probably most people have read it in school. But yeah, he does have a book of short stories, which I don't have anymore. I think I used to at one point, maybe in university. And then apparently, and I didn't realize this was considered Southern Gothic, Toni Morrison's Beloved is also considered in this category. And okay, and I'm back. And I can't remember quite where I left off, except with Toni Morrison. I had to take a quick break and the lighting's gone away. So it's a bit gloomier, but that kind of works for Gothic lit enunciation. Not my strong suit. Okay, so this is one of the first books of hers I ever read, Beloved, and it's amazing. And if you've never read it, I highly recommend it. It's just astonishing. It's such a good book. It's a heartbreaking book. It's not an easy book to read because this woman, Sethi, had killed her child, which I don't think is a spoiler, so that her child didn't have to endure the horrors of slavery. So it's sort of the fallout of that, and I think it's based on a real person, and there's an opera to match, and or an opera that's based on the real person, potentially. And it's just, I mean, if I had to have a list of top 10 favorite books ever, this would be on that list. And that would be a hard list to come up with, but, or to narrow things down to, but this one would guaranteed be on that list. One other book that I don't seem to have anymore is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. it's I can't remember if it was more long short story or novella, but it's not a very long story as I recall. And the movie is based on that book, and I think the book is based on a myth or something to that effect. Anyway, it was a very interesting book. I didn't keep it, so I can't recall if I loved it or not. It was a long time ago that I read it. Some of these I read like 20 years ago. So, okay, anyway, next we're gonna sort of wedge in their difficult to categorize category. And there are a few on this list that they had, and I've added a few. One is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, which is a creepy ghost. I think the woman is a governess as well of a young child, and creepy things happen in this house that she's working in. I only read it because there was an opera based on it, and I didn't love it, sorry to say. Next is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Now, this might be heresy to some people, but I am not the world's biggest Jane Austen fan. I've read a few of her books. I appreciate the social commentary and what she was trying to do. I don't like them. I've tried, and I don't. And if I was ever gonna like any of them, it would be this one, because it's like satire of Gothic literature. So there are a lot of things that are fun about it, and it does make fun of some of the, delicate woman who can't do anything for herself stereotypes and things like that. So there's a lot of fun to be had in that book, but still, apologies to Austen fans everywhere, not for me. Apparently, The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle counts as Gothic lit. It is very, like, misty, foggy, atmospheric. It does have that going on. It's in here somewhere. I don't know where. This is the complete Sherlock Holmes. You can also, if you have Audible, listen to Stephen Fry read every single Sherlock Holmes story ever, which I highly recommend. That's an excellent way to do it if you're more of an audiobook person. Anyway, this is it's got a bit of a creepy, eerie thing going on. Mystery, obviously. More atmospheric, I think, than some of the other mysteries, which is why I expect it's made it on this difficult to categorize list. One other book that I don't have, that I swear I used to have, is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. Stevenson has never been my favorite author. I mean, I like a couple of things that I've read of his, but, that's it. That book's a classic, though, and it's referenced in a lot of other things, so... And it's not... I don't find his work difficult to read. They're like, I don't know, the young adult books at the time, I suppose. So, yeah, that's pretty easy. And then the last one in this category is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. And this is a very atmospheric book that involves, I think, a library as the book dealer. A book dealer... Whoops. Okay, this is a slightly ludicrous day. I'd taken a break earlier to go blow my nose and developed an epic nosebleed, and it started up again. So, if I have to keep running off and end up finishing this in the dark with a flashlight, that'll be why. Anyway, I haven't read... Well, okay, it interests me because it's set in a bookstore, so that'll always catch my interest. And it is very atmospheric. I haven't read... I think there are others in the series that I haven't read, just this one, so I don't know. I'm undecided currently if I'll read the rest, but it's a possibility. Okay, then we're on to contemporary. And I have a stack here that's all out of order, so... Where's Rebecca? I have the book Rebecca somewhere. I don't seem to have it with me. Nope. No idea where it's wandered off to. I swear I put it in this pile, but it's growing legs. So anyway, loved that book. Highly recommend. I also read The Birds and some other novella of hers, I can't remember. Anyway, fantastic. Loved them. Very eerie. And another book that I think will put on my TBR for next month. Well, this month when this is going up, I think, because it's not quite November as I'm filming it. But I think I'll read this Jamaica Inn in November. I think my understanding is the setting in her books, the setting as a character and the atmosphere are what make them sort of Gothic in tone. Out in the wild, rough moors, mysterious, insolent, likable rogue. Okay, I mean, that all sounds a bit Gothic. So I think I will put this on my TBR for the month. I think I'll also put Mexican Gothic, which I've got as an audiobook from the library by Silvia Moreno Garcia on the TBR. That's one of those books that I've been considering reading for a while, and just my list of books to read is too long. It's an ongoing problem. A couple other modern ones are Coraline and The Graveyard Book. Ooh, really is getting very gloomy here. Oh well. It'll set the tone. I'll put some like mist in or something. Anyway, lighting issues aside, now that the sun has gone down, these are fantastic. Coraline I read quite a few years ago, so I have, you know, missing memories of what that's specifically about, but maybe I'll reread it. The Graveyard Book I read quite recently and loved it. I mean, I don't think I've ever not loved a Neil Gaiman book that I've read, and I've read quite a few at this point. So yeah, very atmospheric. I mean, the boy lives in a graveyard and talks to the ghosts, so that is a bit excuse me, bit Gothic. Apparently this year's Sigurda Daughter book, I Remember You, is on that list. Have I finished this one? No, I'm about halfway through this one, so I'll finish this one this month. I stopped it for a while, even though I love her books, because it was too creepy. It was just too disconcerting. And I don't really love scary books. So I'll finish it because I love her and I want to know what happens, but I don't know. I think I probably like her other books better. I've read a lot of her books now, and yeah, she's a favorite. Okay. Last author to talk about, nearing the end here, is Walpole Rice. So the first book that he wrote is Moon of the Crusted Snow, which is really eerie. It's really atmospheric and very strange and it's a post-apocalyptic sort of book, where they live on a reserve in, I think, well, somewhere in Ontario, southern-ish, I don't know, could be further north. And all the power goes off, and then it never goes back on again. So it's sort of a, you know, stay away from the south where all the cities are for fear of your life sort of situation that they're in. And then they, wow, lost the ability to talk there for a second. Anyway, they have to figure out how to survive, again, without modern technology. And yeah, it's amazing. I've got it in French, so I can reread it once my French gets a hair better. And his newest book, which is set 20 years after, is Moon of the Turning Leaves. And I just started because I keep getting distracted by other things. It's a problem. But I will finish this one. I like it so far. They have moved into the bush away from the reserve, further north, I believe. And it's 20 years later, and they're considering having to move again because the land exactly where they are may not support them indefinitely. And I think they're Anishinaabe because I think he's Anishinaabe. And they used to move around like seasonally, or when the resources on a certain area of land were used up, they'd move to a different area for a while and then come back, that sort of thing. That's my understanding anyway. And yeah, he's coming to Alberta for book events next Monday. So I will, if you ever have a chance to go to one of his events, they're fantastic. he's a great author and just a really interesting human being. Next, they had a movies category. So, of course, I've seen Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, Rebecca, Sleepy Hollow. Crimson Peak is one of my all-time favorites. I love that movie. It's so good. Edward Scissorhands I also loved. And Sweeney Todd is a fun one. It seems to me that there's the occasional Doctor Who episode that may also be considered a bit gothic in tone. There's one with Dickens during the 9th Doctor's run, and then one with the 13th Doctor that's actually set at Via Diodati, which is where Frankenstein was written. So yeah, I'm not a big movies and TV show person, but those are the ones that I've watched from the list, and I may or may not watch any more. Probably not, if I'm being honest. Anyway, that's my list of goth lit books that I have read and books that I think I'll read in November. And then maybe at the end of the month I'll do a quick summary of the ones I've successfully read in November, since it is the, you know, curl up with a blanket and some hot chocolate sort of weather outside now. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. If you've made it this far, congratulations and thank you, and I'll see you next time.